Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm Jackie Hewson. I work in the Economic Development team at Valley Borough Council. I'm delighted to welcome everybody to this seminar this morning, which will be an introduction to AI for small businesses. We're really glad to have Luke presenting for us from the Intergage group. We are recording, as Luke has said, we'll go onto YouTube later. So Test Valley as a council recognises that AI is bringing major change to businesses, that's threats and opportunities, which is why we are funding these sessions to help businesses in our area to navigate the new landscape. We've worked with Luke for about 18 months now, so Luke ran some sessions for us in 2024 in Andover and Romsey, but AI moves so fast that we came up with a bit of a new offering for this winter where we're doing a pair of sessions. So today's more theoretical webinar, and then next week at Crossfield Hall in Romsey, we'll have a hands-on morning workshop in person. We did run a similar pair of sessions in October with a workshop in Andover and had excellent feedback. There is still a little bit of opportunity to sign up to next week's workshop if you wish to do that, but the spaces are running out. So I would advise you to do that straight after this session if you are interested. At the end, Luke will show you a QR code, I hope, to give feedback to me. It is very important that I know that I'm spending the council budget wisely, so I am interested to know your views, so please let me know. So that's all I want to say. I'll pass over to Luke. Thank you very much, Luke.
Good morning all. So yeah, my name's Luke. I'm from the Intergage group. Don't need to know more about me. It's not very exciting. If you do have any questions as we go through the day, please do chuck them in the chat. I can see a few people have joined since I said that, so apologies if that's the second time for me saying that. One other thing I would add is AI moves very quickly. So one thing I do to try and make sure that I make it accessible for everyone is that if I use a term or an acronym without explaining it, fire something at me in the chat and I find myself £1 for charity every time I do it. Last year, I only did it 27 times during a whole year's worth of presenting, which I then doubled and donated to. Last year was My Time Young Carers charity. Annoyingly, that was one more than the year before when I did 26. So I'm hoping this year is an even lower score. I'm hoping to get a sub 20 this year, but AI does move very rapidly. So please do shout in the chat if there is something that a term or an acronym that I don't then go on to explain. Great. So we're going to do a quick overview of AI, and the aim really is just to make sure that you can understand how large language models work, which is slightly different to the way some people believe. And it's going to be about 5 minutes. It's the most technical bit we do, but I have 100% success rate on getting people to understand it so far. And I believe you're not going to be the group that lets me down on that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about ChatGPT prompting once we understand how large language models work. We're going to talk a little bit about the ethical considerations, some unique risks and opportunities of AI, and then I have plenty of time for questions, as well as if you have a question, chuck it in the chat, and Jackie will flag to me if there's one that I miss. So without further ado, let's get cracking. So where are we now? I think there's a bit of a feeling amongst many people that I meet when I'm training that they're behind the curve, and I would say 99% of the people I meet are still experimenting, and that is the position that most people are in. If you're there or you're starting to get there, please don't feel that you're behind and don't feel that you need to go and explore every single tool that's out there. I would always state that the start with what is the thing I'm trying to do, not try and understand every gazillion AI tools that are out there. The tools are maturing, so we're moving to the point, please. We're moving to the point where AI is being integrated into other applications, and also those tools that are from AI people are maturing. So we've seen people like Anthropic and Claude introducing specific legal tools or coding tools, and we see sort of similar moves from other players. So yes, we're very much still at the front, sort of leading edge of it, and as you'd expect, laws and regulations are slower than the tools themselves. So there are some there are some kind of lookouts around that we'll talk about a little bit later in the session. Very much in the UK, there's kind of some basic guidance, but there isn't much in the way of very specific regulation unless you're in something, a very specific industry like automated vehicles, or where you're looking at using AI for biometric data, which I'm going to assume no one on this call is directly, but just to make you kind of aware of that. So the first thing I'm going to do here is do understanding LLMs. So when we talk about large language models, what I mean by that is OpenAI ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Anthropic Claude, any of those other tools that you might have come across, Microsoft Copilot, and they are largely interchangeable in terms of what they do and how they work. ChatGPT is just a very spicy autocomplete. There's a saying from a great tech writer called Kate Bevan, who I have told her I've stolen it and put it on slides for ages. And what we mean by that is, when you go to Google, and if you ignore the AI overviews for a second, you ask it a question, it goes off and looks that answer up and then gives you its best guesses what the answer is. With ChatGPT, when you type a sentence into the chatbot, what it's doing, so GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. The transformer means things goes in, things come out. The pre-trained bit is that it has been trained on lots and lots of information so that it can generate an output for you. But what that means is there is this big, if you imagine a three-dimensional, lots and lots of points connected to each other, and from one word to the next, there is a percentage chance that that's most likely. So, and they train it on all this stuff. They break it down to what they call tokens, but really roughly they're words. And by training it like lots and lots and lots of data, it increases the likelihood of it going from one word to another in exactly the same way predictive text works on your phone or anywhere else. But what this means is it works in a slightly different way to what you might expect. And that's why you get some of these anomalies that people call hallucinations, or people give it a bit of a gotcha because, AI can't be that smart if it doesn't know how many R's are in strawberry, for example. But the reason that it gets those things wrong is it's just auto-completing to the best of its ability. So if I was to put in the word test, for example, there will be a percentage chance that the outcome might be Valley, but equally it could be test procedure or test process. And dependent on all of the context of the words around it, there is a percentage chance of which word it will output based on what you ask it to do. Now, that's still a slightly abstract concept. So what I'm going to get you to do now, and I know you can all use the chat because you've been using it to say yes or no, is I'm going to set you a quick question to work in the same way. So here is some training data I want you to take on board. So if everyone can read these, read them in your head. So the blue car was faster, fastest car was blue, cars that are blue are fast. On the next slide, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want to see who can answer it as fast as possible into the chat. So has everyone read those? Yes, I'm going to give you another quick second. So the blue car was faster, fastest car was blue, cars that are blue are fast. Right, in the chat, I want you to answer the question as quick as possible. Everyone ready to go? Right, blue cars are, go. So everyone has said fast, fastest, or faster, which is what happens every time. So there's your probabilities, right? There's a slight element of randomness. So everyone wasn't consistent, but there was consistency between what the three answers were. Is that correct? No, right? But what you've done there is you've also completed the best of your ability based on the training information we gave you. So by repeating that training information just 3 times, you all said blue cars are fast, faster, or fastest. And also based on the information you had and were trained on, that is possibly correct. But is that necessarily correct? No, of course not. A red car is fastest. Everyone knows that because the blue car and the red car had a race, right? But if I told you the blue car was faster, or fastest car was blue lights flashing, cars that are blue are fast, becoming harder to sell, you can see that as you expand out on that information, the context of that changes. And that's why we would always say when you're prompting to use a longer, more involved prompt, because what you're doing is you're taking this huge network of auto completing points, this massive autocorrect, and you're making it more and more specific, the parameters it wants to look within. So in the same way I gave you those 3 bits of training information, by giving it longer context here, you can see that that might change your answer. Because now if I'd shown you these 3 and said, blue cars are, there's not an obvious answer necessarily. You wouldn't have necessarily jumped to the same conclusion. And that at its heart is what makes a large language model different to other forms of systems, is that it has a percentage chance that it auto completes the next word. and also it has a small element of randomness. You know, we saw generally, I think the word fast came out the most, but faster and fastest were probably about an equal second and third place. And that's exactly what happens. That's why you don't get exactly the same output every time. It's because it contains a percentage chance. And you can dial that up or down if you want it to be more creative, i.e. random, or more consistent with your answers. But what's important to understand is the context you give it will improve the quality of the output you get. And that's a really important question. It's why we get hallucinations. Because there is a really popular limerick that was in the training data a lot, that is how many R's are in the word berry. So when people asked it the question, how many R's are in strawberry, its best guess of an answer was 2. So when people are saying, oh, this is proof that AI is dumb, no, that's just proof that people don't understand how it comes to that answer. It auto-completed to 2 because that's the most likely outcome it had based on the training data it was given. That's it. That's the techie bit over. If anyone is unsure about that, please let me know and I'll happily reiterate it. But although I can't see you all, I saw how quickly you replied and I'm confident that that's there. And it does really underpin what we're going to talk about briefly today and just how generally to use AI. And to be honest, if you take nothing else away from what I show you today, and if you come to the session next week, I guarantee that will help you with your use of AI and prompting from now on. So the other reason that we think this stuff is important, which Jackie talked about earlier, is that the pace of change is accelerating. From when ChatGPT first kind of went public in November 22, I have to stop and think, was it 22 or 23? 22. The context size, so that's the amount of information we could put in and ask it questions about, was around 8 pages of A4. And it was what we would say was 32,000 tokens, because it breaks down into, sometimes words break down to more than one bit. And if you're breaking down images, obviously that will also have information like the color, the context, the style, etc. But really roughly, if you think, when you see things mentioned, context size or token size of either input or output, what they're talking about there really roughly is words, but slightly more. The latest Google Gemini Pro model can handle enough information going in as 30 books. So we've gone from 8 pages of A4 to 30 books worth of information that you can load in as context and get it to ask you about, and it can analyze. Now, even if AI doesn't get any smarter than it is today, that context window is growing all the time, and that enables us to do more and smarter things with it. And that's why we're in this continuous cycle of it getting better and better. When I did this slide with the October group that Jackie mentioned, I had the word agentic on here grayed out. I'll explain what that means in a second. But we've gone from AI where in that first release in November, you could give it specific tasks, but if you needed it to do a set of actions, you had to go back and forth with it to do all of those. We moved, and certainly over the last year and maybe a little bit before that, to the point where you could give it projects. So you could, in one prompt, ask it to go away, research something online, produce a report, and then create a table at the end of it and a summary. You could do that in one prompt now, and it would work out the steps it needs to take. But it would still come back and forth and ask you, oh, I can't do that, or I can do that, and then you'd have to go back and forth and prompt it. The next phase of this is what you might have heard come across as agentic. Hi, Jackie.
We are now on an introduction to AI webinar slide again. Is that correct?
Introduction to AI webinar slide. Oh, what, the first one? It's moved on one, has it?
Yeah, so now the pace, that's the pace of change. That's number 10.
Is everyone on the pace of change slide? Just get a quick yes or no.
So it was, what is 11? Because 11 in a minute ago was this introductory.
I think you can individually move the slides on, so perhaps you accidentally hit that, I don't know. I'm going to carry on. Can someone just chuck in the chat if they don't see? I'll say when I move on to the next slide each time, and if it doesn't move on, just flag it in the chat for me. So agentic AI is the idea of actually something just acting almost independently of you. And at the weekend, there was a tool which underwent 2 name changes, which I won't bore you with, but you might have seen it because it was mentioned on BBC News and lots of places online. There was a tool called ClawdBot, CLAW, D-bot, which very quickly got a lawsuit threat from Claude, as in Anthropic Claude, and changed name over the weekend to Maltbot, and now has become OpenClaw. I don't know why it went through all those names, but it's always had a lobster character all the way through. This is the first what I would call kind of truly agentic AI that is now available. You can install it on your own machine. You then connect it with what you call skills. So you can say, yes, you can have access to my diary, the web, my machine, my whatever server, and you connect it to say WhatsApp or perhaps Signal or one of those kind of messaging apps. And then you just message it wherever you are from your phone, whatever, and just say, hi, whatever name you've given it. So a lot of people seem to call it Jarvis, which isn't particularly imaginative, but there we go. Hi, Jarvis, can you book me a place at this pizza restaurant that I love for Saturday at 7 p.m. It sends a message to your little server that's running locally, and that will then work out how to do that for you, and then message you back and say it's done. Why I say this is agentic and really interesting is there's a well-documented case over the weekend where someone did exactly that. When the agent went to go and book on the website a table, the website didn't have the facility to do that. So what it did is it installed a skill to be able to make phone calls. It installed a voice clone, and then it rang the restaurant and made a reservation and then returned that information to it. But as far as the person at the other end knew, he just said, can you book me a place at this restaurant? And it just went off. And because it couldn't work out how to do it, it then fixed the steps in between. So that's why I'd say that is a big step on from just prompting something specifically, but for a project, or giving it tasks that build up into a bigger thing. And I don't want to give myself a gold star, but I did say we'd see that in 2026, and we're in February and it's starting to happen. So there we go. But there's one important caveat that Jackie and I briefly talked about before we started this call. At the moment, that is not very secure. So to give it access to all of those things isn't done in a very secure way at the moment. So I would not advise anyone playing with OpenClaw right now. But why it's significant is we're very close. And I would say within the next 2 or 3 months, there will be commercial offerings that do similar, that do solve the security problems that has. So we're into a very, very interesting time now. Aside from that, you can get AI, as I'm sure you know, to analyze video, images, and complex documents. You can get it to write code, create images, music, and have real-time voice conversations with it, where it may or may not clone a voice. Prior to the agentic thing, which I only updated yesterday, you could get it to use a web browser on your behalf within OpenAI, for example, run simple programs and do some basic levels of control. Yep, we're on page 10 still. So moving on to page 11. So I used AI to generate this header image. I use AI to create a lot of information in my slides. Yes, that's correct, Sam. We are on a title page again. So the prompt I used to do that was what I would call a project prompt, because I didn't break it down into individual steps. I just said, I need a header image for a slide. The slide needs to represent the Test Valley Borough region. Please find 5 landmarks and then take those landmarks and trace them into an outline and combine it into one image. So previously I would have had to do those as separate steps, but now I can just give it that one. It'll go off and do it. It then actually came back and said, actually, can I just check? This is what I think I want you to do. And I said, yep, create it in a PNG. And we got that image that we've got there, which is consistent, I think, with the style and branding. So that's an example of a few things there. One is that we're definitely in that project level, not just task level AI, in which we're moving to agentic. And then secondly, is we can create very usable and recognizable images with a fairly simple prompt. So the current version of ChatGPT is a model called 5.2. And one thing I really love about that is everyone onto GPT 5.2 modes and tools. If you're not, can you put no in? I think it has moved on, but as you did. Yeah, okay, great. Sorry for any glitches today. Yes, slide 15. That's probably an easier way I should have said to do it. So prior to ChatGPT 5, one thing that was very frustrating as someone training in AI is there were lots of different modes you could switch between when you went in there. And that was true of Claude and all the other ones as well, where you could pick ChatGPT 4.0, 04, 03, ChatGPT 4.5, I forget what some of the others were. And then there was fast and thinking and all these other kind of combinations. The great thing they did with ChatGPT 5, and we're seeing others follow suit, is certainly Gemini, for example, is they put them all in one place. And by default, it goes into an auto mode where you don't need to worry about that. So what are those two modes, just very briefly? Well, sometimes what you want from ChatGPT is just a quick answer. You're confident that it will have been trained on enough stuff. And as you get to use it more often, you'll understand that actually, I just want, can you just work out, you've taken a picture of an item in your home, you're like, what is this? What's this fallen off? You just want it to go and find the answer and come back. In that case, you want a fast mode. Or if you're using AI for something like a conversation, like a chatbot thing, you want it to be fairly fast to respond. But sometimes you want it to think deeper. So taking research tasks, you might want to switch into a thinking mode where what it does is it actually will break down and stop and think about what are the steps I need to do to complete this problem before I do it, rather than just taking my words as verbatim and just doing exactly what I've put. It'll actually go through some steps saying, what do they actually mean by this? What's the context? What other tools do I need to fire up and do that? Aside from that, you also have some little options where you can switch tools on for things like making sure it does search the web, using what's called Canvas, where it will spin up a little side window so you can work side by side with the document, whatever. And there's also a thing called custom instructions where you can configure how it works in there. Right, moving on to 16. So when we talk about writing effective prompts, there are 4 key steps and then kind of 2 processy bits that I would do. So give it a persona. So thinking back to that big web of interconnected things where it's also completing, if you say to it, act as a marketing expert, what you're effectively doing is just shrinking down that pool and places that it's going to answer from, because you've given it that context, so it will be more accurate in its output. So give it a persona, tell it who it is, give it a task where you specify what you want in as concrete and as consistent a way as possible. If you've switched on something like a thinking mode, it will generally ask you for clarification on some of the points when it comes back. Give it context, so provide some background details, why you're doing it, who your audience is, what some examples of what a good output looks like. If there are any constraints, things you don't want it to do or look at. And then also be very specific with the format. If you say to an AI, give me a short blog post, if I said to all of you, how many words is a short blog post, you'd give me 29 different answers, right? We would all have a different answer to that. So be really specific. Say, I want 4 sentences. I want 500 words. It's not always going to get that perfect because it's an autocomplete. So as well as it can, it will give you answers for that. But remember that it's learned that 400 or 500 words on reading things with that context. And the general guidance I would say is avoid ambiguity, excuse me, and give it, just be as specific as you can. But then also, previously, some people used to always say, oh, if you write a prompt, you don't get what you want, rewrite the prompt and try again. I've never been an advocate for that. And that's definitely not the right way to use it now with these more advanced models. Iterate and refine. Think of it as a conversation with an intern or a junior member of staff where you need to give them specific guidance on how to get what you want out of it. And most of the time when people are saying that they don't get much from AI, it's that they're not writing long enough or detailed enough prompts. They think I should be able to just put, give me a blog about travel, and that'll somehow give them exactly the blog that they want. Absolutely not. You need to be more specific. So you are a sustainability focused travel writer. I'm being really specific with the persona. Write a friendly 400-word guide. So again, I'm giving it very specific context on the output, introducing beginners to sustainable travel. Again, really narrowing that down. Context is highlight environmental conservation, responsible tourism, include examples from Europe. Format, use a conversational tone and finish with 3 bullet pointed tips. So I've been really niche and specific there. And yes, absolutely. I mean, you can't put bold into a prompt, but I do use things like persona : some people like to break up prompts using the hash symbol. So you can use that. If you give it headings to say, this is the persona, this is the task, this is context, here's an example input, here's an example output, all of that stuff will help and it will understand the context of that. I tend to write them like this or with hashes to separate so I might say hash persona, and then on a new line write the persona. If I've got more than a couple of sentences, I tend to do it that way. So I did exactly that for these slides. I need to write 3 slides which contain the current best practice prompting for ChatGPT 5, because I think the last time I came to present to a Test Valley group, they announced, very helpfully for me, they announced a new version of ChatGPT the night before I was due to present it. So I just said, okay, let's test it out. Can you give me 3 slides on how to do it? Slide 1 should be like this, slide 2 should be like that, and I want 6 bullet points, and slide 3 must as an example prompt. And yeah, said absolutely, it did its stuff, and those are the slides you just saw. I slightly formatted them a bit to make them a bit prettier, but that's exactly how I generated those slides for you. So I want to just talk a little bit about the evolution of generative AI. And when we say generative AI, we mean interchangeable with large language models. And there's a very slight technical difference, but I think it's important as context for why we think this is important to business. Is the pace of change in AI is going at a phenomenal rate. In 2 to 3 years, we've gone from text to images to text to almost indistinguishable from real life video. So this is a little guy. If any of you have seen me train before, I always include this poor little fella. The prompt was two medium-sized dogs playing in a field. So at the start or early 2023, it generated this image for me. I love this guy. It's kind of got two tails on the left, sort of two paws merged together at the front, but I don't think anyone would be convinced that this is a real dog. Certainly not two dogs playing in a field of medium size. That's where we were with text to images in 2023. The same thing at the start of 2024. I did two dogs playing in a field in an image generator, and it gave me this. I have studied this image in quite a lot of detail, zoomed in, and there are not many things in it that give away that this is AI generated. It's quite difficult to distinguish this image from reality, and that was just over a year and a half ago. Then about this time last year, for a workshop, there was a new tool come out called Google VO2, which allowed you to do text to video. So see if anyone can spot the AI glitch in this video. If you can spot the why it's obviously AI, chuck it in the chat. There's no sound on this either. Hopefully that's playing okay for everyone. Did anyone spot that? Yeah, it sort of weirdly merges the two dogs together into being the same animal. So they start off as a collie and a golden, I guess, and then they sort of weirdly merge into being the same type of dog. So it's quite convincing, but that obviously doesn't happen in real life. So I did it again the other day. Actually, it might technically be in February 2026. Sorry about that. You can now generate pretty convincing text and video with audio that's consistent to the video, and with physics that is fairly accurate. So this is Google VO3, which I did a couple of days ago. And again, that was just my very basic prompt. I didn't give it really detailed information about the lighting, the camera, the setting. I just, again, said just two medium-sized dogs playing in a field. That was it. And there's a couple of little things that aren't quite perfect, but it's very, very close. And so I mention this because I think it's important for businesses to understand we're in this era now where image and video that you see online could be AI or could be real, and it's very, very difficult to distinguish between them. At the moment, we're mostly relying on people saying that they've used AI to generate it, which obviously nefarious people aren't going to do. But why does that matter? I mean, this is just two dogs in a field. This is not a real receipt. As an experiment with their knowledge, I wasn't trying to defraud my employer. When I was doing my expenses, I took a photo of a receipt and I asked it to double the amount on the receipt. It was a completely flat receipt when I took the photo, and asked it also to make it look crumpled. And there are some things in this that you can spot that are wrong. If anyone can spot any of them, please do chuck it in the chat. So there's 4 or 5 things in here. If you can spot them, do chuck it in the chat. What was really astonishing for me was I didn't explicitly say this is a VAT receipt, but it did also double the net VAT items. It didn't. All I said was, can you double the amount on this receipt? Yes, FRAM is one of them. Good spot. And customer is correct. Whatever the Hickson symbol is, yes, there is a couple of odd symbols in there. Christchurch, yes, that's my favorite. It does say at the top Christchurch Road. If you spotted that, well done, Sarah. Yeah. So Seston, FRAM, Vertified, and there's also the wrong number of digits on the card number I spotted since I took this screenshot and annotated it. 100 points if you can spot that Also, the font is wrong. So when I showed this to my accounts team, she spotted straight away that this isn't actually strictly correctly the post office font on a receipt, because she had seen so many post office receipts. Now, you or I don't think would have spotted that, but that's again why expertise in the domain of AI is still really important, is having that human knowledge in the loop. And this is why I say that other image generation or video generation stuff is important, because as a business, someone could be using things like this, and we need to consider all of these capabilities of AI and how they could be used and misused. And there are some unique risks of AI. So first of all, there's a term called AI slop. Has anyone come across this? That's kind of sort of seeping out into the real world. What that means is it's just obviously AI generated useless information. So it might be junk videos where there seems to be a lot of cat ones at the moment where they're doing things that are just not possible. And yeah, correct. Facebook adults love it. Yeah, Cats at the Gym. There was quite a famous viral one recently. One I saw actually online on Facebook that weirdly I knew was fake for an odd reason, is there was a video of a shark kind of coming up at a boat and someone taps it on the nose and it kind of winks away and it looks like it smiles. People were saying, oh, this is amazing, nature is safe and friendly and all that kind of stuff. Weirdly, one of my friends is obsessed with sharks, and about a week earlier in the pub, she'd said, oh, they always have 3 gill slits, and this shark only had 1. And so I knew it was fake only for that reason. But no one else, it had like 1 million views and no one had called it out as fake. And it's only because I had that very odd specific bit of domain knowledge that I knew that. And that again reinforces that thing. Yes, Will Smith eating spaghetti. The latest version of that I've seen, I can't tell it's not real, just as an aside. Deep fakes, so it's quite easy to create a digital clone of someone now. It takes about 2 minutes of video. And for those of you that are of similar age to me, you might remember what happened with Gerald Ratner when he stood up and said all of our jewellery is junk, and it immediately destroyed the value of his company. We're at a point now it would be quite easy to take video content of someone and create a deep fake of, let's say, your MD or chief exec saying our company's rubbish. You could go to our competitor and that would be great, or you could make it look like it was hidden footage. So I think there are some real risks that businesses need to just be thinking about a little bit, and that could also extend to phishing or hacking attacks. So that's to say, it is very easy, and in fact we created a digital clone of my boss's voice for an experiment about 1.5 years ago, where you could you could put your mobile number and your name, and my boss, but a digital version of it, would call you back and you could ask him questions about the training services we offer. There was a bit of a time delay on the first version we ran and it wasn't quite convincing enough. The latest version, we didn't make any changes, but the AI tools improved. When we reran it, it was convincing enough that stood next to his wife, he got her to speak to the AI clone of him, and she said she would be convinced that was him. They'd been married over 25 years, and she was completely convinced that would have been, she said, I would have been convinced that was you if you hadn't been stood next to me, apart from when she got it stuck in a loop because she was trying to break it to get it to say other things, and it was going, hey, I can't talk about that, but let me tell you about our training. She'd ask someone else, say, hey, I can't talk about that, but how about I tell you about the training we offer? So we're at this point now where phone calls can be quite convincingly real. There is also now a tool where you can give it knowledge and send it to a Teams call on your behalf. So there's a tool called HeyGen where you can create a digital avatar of yourself, give it a PDF, for example, of the knowledge you want to take to a meeting. It will go to the meeting on your behalf, and if people ask it questions, it can answer those questions based on the knowledge you give it. At the moment, it's not quite convincing as fully real, but I have heard of a client who had a digital clone of someone on a job interview, and they caught it out, and actually it was someone pretending to be the person that was applying for the job. I don't know why, but that's what they did. So that has happened in real life to someone I know already. Hallucinations we talked about earlier, but it's important for a business to understand if you've got your team using AI, they understand how hallucinations can occur and why they occur, and that if you're using AI tools, you have human checks in place to make sure that you're verifying the output and that you still have humans with domain knowledge, because it might create you a convincing sounding legal contract, but if you're not a lawyer, you don't know that actually that might be valid or not valid. There's a really important concept I like to talk about called the 80-20, which is AI will make the first 80% of something a lot easier to do, but the last 20% generally harder. So if you ask it to write you a blog post, it'll help you get 80% of the way there, but you will find as you go back and forth and try and refine it, with prompting, because of the context window, as it's putting in all of the previous conversation, actually it can drift away from what you want sometimes. That can be especially true if you're trying to get graphics pixel perfect. It'll create a graphic, it'll be close. You'll try and refine one thing, and because it's got a slight random element every time you regenerate, it'll kind of sometimes drift away from what you actually wanted. So allowing for that is really important. I think a lot of people that fail with AI projects is because they're expecting it to be 100% perfect, not allowing for it doing that. And it gets better over time, but that's still something I would consider. Another real risk is it can be very sycophantic without tweaking the system, which we can show you next week if you want. It tends to be very sycophantic, and that's true of all of the platforms. And that can be a problem if you need it to be critically researching things. I'm sure all of us have found the case where you ask it something, you go, no, that's not right. And it goes, oh yeah, you're absolutely right, that's not right. And you're like, well, kind of, why didn't you say that in the first place? And it's because it does have some desire to be seen as helpful and responsive. And because it's auto completing, sometimes those two things fight together. Black box decision making. So if you're in an industry that's regulated, so for example, finance, sometimes, for example, to HMRC, you need to justify why you reached a particular decision. If you use AI for that, you don't necessarily know the steps it took. So with normal programming, you always say, if this, then that, or do this loop, or whatever. When it gives you an answer you don't expect, you can go back and see why that is. Because AI is trained and then it's kind of auto completing the answer, you can't necessarily justify why it will do certain things. So if you've got something like that, what you'll need to do is you'll need to have a set of inputs and known outputs to test it against to say that actually it is working the way we expect. An example I often talk about of this is I gave a talk. Someone who came to that talk came to one of my workshops about a couple of months later, and they said we were using this HR tool that it promised us was free from bias. And so to test it, she herself describes herself as having a very non-English first name, and her middle name was Ruth. She put her CV in twice, once using Ruth, once using her actual first name, and she got different results at the other end. Now, that is not what you would expect if a tool was truly bias-free. And so she went back to the supplier, and it became a bit of a thing on LinkedIn, and they did a lot of work to resolve that. But the danger there is if you were using that tool and someone tried that same exercise on you, you would be liable for it. So despite these tools making these promises, understanding that it can hallucinate, that it can produce biased output, and that the decision is kind of black box, test it with known outputs and combinations of things to make sure that it's working in the way you expect, to make sure you don't get caught out in any way. So that was 2 minutes audio. I thought it was the same shirt, but it's a similar shirt that I created. And it's not quite perfect, but that was just literally this mobile phone in my meeting room. As you can probably tell, no special lighting. I did have a little Bluetooth microphone, which you can see on my shirt there. And I just type in the text. Whenever I've got a new seminar, I just update the text and press generate. I don't have to re-record that every time for a session. As I demonstrate at the end there, I'm sorry for any Love Island fans, I'm really not a fan. I also don't have an American accent, and I couldn't do a convincing one. But what's really important about that is Digital Luke can speak French, German, Italian, Spanish, Japanese. And I've worked with a number of organizations where they've been struggling with training videos, particularly around health and safety for warehouse workers where English isn't their first language. And so what they've been able to do is record a digital clone of the trainer, do it in English, create a translation of the text, get that verified by a native speaker, and then just regenerate the video in all of the native languages, all of the other languages that they want for their team. So they've then got a consistent training video that's not subtitles and is in the other languages that they need for their staff. And in the cases where they've done that, it's been really, really effective. But where it was really effective, and when they dropped me a line and it really made me smile, was a bit of legislation around something to do with safety, health and environment legislation changed. They just updated the text in all the videos in all the languages to refer to the new whatever it was, hit generate, had a new set of videos within a couple of hours. Previously, you had had to go through a massive process of setting up the cameras, re-recording it, checking all the translations, creating all the different videos, publishing them. They just went back through all their language videos, updated the bit of text, published them all, off it went, done. And so, yes, at the moment, I would say you can use these for training. They're not, some people are starting to use them on websites, but I'm not sure most people are aware that the technology is that good and that easy to use. So that's from a tool called HeyGen. I'll include a link to it in the slides at the end. And there is a beta version of this where I could give Digital Luke some knowledge in a PDF or Word doc or whatever and send him to a Teams meeting now. So there could be a digital representation of me speaking in that way, answering questions put directly to me that are in the knowledge bank and then feeding back to me. It is a bit creepy. I also find it weird introducing a digital version of myself. Yeah, so sorry if that weirded anyone out, but I think it's quite good. I mean, you've seen me talk now, and I think you'd be relatively. It's certainly not bad enough that it's jarring. I think it's good enough for things like training videos. If you use it with clients, different matter, but yeah, but we use it also to customize videos to people we speak to and to do some simple training things. We sometimes use a voiceover, and then if we need to update the training again, we can just update the script rather than having to re-record it each time and just take a quick screen grab. So talking a bit about responsible and ethical use of AI. So it's really important for fairness that you're making sure you check for bias and explainability of outcomes. Do put safeguards for accuracy in. So we here at Intergage, we have an AI statement on our website, and that says that any content we generate using AI will go through human checks before it goes out to the public or to a client. And it's really important we do so, especially if you're, I don't know, reviewing information on behalf of a client or something. Any existing legislation still applies. So for some reason, people seem to think GDPR doesn't apply to OpenAI. If you're going to be uploading any personal identifiable information, you need to have them listed as a data processor. I'm not a GDPR thorough expert, but I know that you have to do that. So, existing data privacy software tools use that you would have with your company policy would all and should all still apply. In terms of sustainability, there's sometimes questions around the amount of water and power use and the impact of AI on jobs, particularly in, society. And I think these are things that we need to consider as business leaders. One thing I would urge anyone to consider is the current group of students that are going to graduate in June or July, whatever, will have been AI native for all of their university career. So AI will have been around. This will be the first group of students that will have had AI and will use it in ways that those that use it, they will have grown up as AI has grown up through their university career and will be AI native in ways that we can't expect. And I would say this is going to be, if you are looking at bringing a junior in, absolutely someone who uses AI is going to be important. And I think there's a challenge there because they might need some guidance in how to use it safely, effectively, but they will absolutely technically know good ways of using it. But we need to provide that guardrail, that expertise and that domain excellence that we have. In terms of regulation, mostly it's guidance. And the important thing in all of the guidance that does or is in place in the UK, particularly the ICO, is transparency is one of the main things that will go there. So what we mean by that is under the EU AI Act, which Jackie will know I always struggle to say, there is one of the guiding principles is you must state if your chatbot, for example, uses AI. And if any of us work with EU partners, that does apply to our websites. So it's extrajudicial or whatever it's called. So if you have an AI chatbot on your website and you have EU customers, you should declare that that is AI. And actually, I think it's a good thing to do anyway. Equally with images and things like that, there's some discussion whether it needs to be just metadata or whether it needs to be explicitly labeled. But I think as long as you're making your best guidance, that's there. And the EU AI Act kind of basic principles, I think, are going to become, we'll see similar legislation in the UK eventually. So they operate under 4 levels. So there are some things you can't do with AI. So you can't use AI to manipulate someone to buy your products by leading them down a path and being convincing in a chat. You can't use it to look at someone's face and take a score of what their credit score would be, for example. There are some things that are listed as unacceptable and you cannot do. If there are high risk systems, so things like processing personal data to decide a credit score, or if it's an autonomous vehicle, then yes, there are regulated things you need to do. Most of the things you'll do, though, are just limited risk AI systems where it's just a case of being transparent about it. There's also a bottom level where minimum risk is unregulated. It's considered minimal risk, so it's unregulated, i.e. if you're playing a game, it's expected that some of the characters that you battle with might be AI. And things like that, and things like spam filtering. It's not needed to explicitly say that we use AI to check incoming email as spam. So some of the best practices, I would always consider creating an AI statement, and I'll include a link to ours in a second. So that's just a little document that says, this is what we use AI for as an organization. This is what we will and won't use it for. Do check the terms and conditions for any tool you use. Generally speaking, free AI tools will use your data in training, or you don't have the rights to use the output commercially. The classic one of these is there was a tool that went very viral on LinkedIn about a year and a half ago where you can put in 10 headshots and it will generate you one in a variety of settings. What you were giving them permission to do was to generate an AI model of your biographic data, of your geometric face data to train their AI face recognition tool. And so when you then got the creations and you said yes or no, this is a good representation of myself, you were helping them to train an AI that could learn on your data, and it also kept your biometric data and email address tied. So in the future, they could potentially sell that to someone either to verify that you are who you say you are, etc. It was very suspect, but hey, it was free, and AI hype people were like, yeah, there's this great free thing. Always read the terms and conditions. And remember that existing regulation applies. So regardless of what they tell you about your data secure when you use it, if you put in, let's say, a customer record because you want to analyze it with ChatGPT, just consider how they're storing it, whether they should need to be a data processor. And sorry to bang on about that. Does anyone have an AI usage statement or policy at their current company job, or if they work for themselves, have they set one? Just have a quick, I don't know, a show of hands or a yes or a no in the chat. I'm always curious at this point if anyone does already have that. No. I generally find there's a couple from a group about this size, but depends hugely on the size of the organization. I find a sort of medium and large organizations seem more likely to have one at the moment. So I would say the good first step for any organization looking to adopt AI sensibly would be to think of what is an AI statement. So just a one-page simple document that says, our use of AI is in line with data protection. This is what we will and won't use it for. So it might be, yes, we'll use it to record calls and create meeting summaries. I'm aware of a PR agency local to me that has an AI statement. It says, we will not use AI in any part of the press release writing process. That will remain a human endeavor, but we will use AI to transcribe meeting notes. And asking those questions of yourselves and your organization will make you think about, how do I want to use AI? What do our customers expect of it? If you want to see our AI statement, if you go to intergage.co.uk, and again, I'll include a link to it in the slides, or if you want to scan it now, feel free. We just have an AI statement, bottom right hand of our bottom right hand corner of our website in the footer, and it's just one page that just says what we do and don't use AI for as an organization. And we expand that all the time. I'm writing a new draft at the moment because we realize we need to have a section on there around what we expect people that are applying to us have or have not used AI in that process. So basically, we're starting to see, and I'm sure many of you are, cover letters written by ChatGPT badly, frankly, and CVs that have been manipulated to best suit the job role. We're happy for people to use AI to apply to a job for us, but we want them to declare that they've done so. And if we think that someone's used AI and used it badly, we will score that against them. And we want to be clear about that in our AI statement. So here are some sort of starters for 10. I wasn't planning to go through these in detail, but here are some of the questions I ask when I work with clients, looking at what should be in there. I've kind of talked about most of those. But I think the important one is that what do our clients and customers expect from us? Would they want to speak to an AI when you call in? Probably not. Will they be happy out of hours talking to an AI chatbot on your website? Quite possibly, if it helps them. So I think having a think about that as an organisation is always helpful. And we will send you a copy of these slides and a recording of this session afterwards. I now want to allow some time for questions, but while we do so, if you could scan this and do some feedback for Jackie, or make sure you do it afterwards, that would be really respected. I've got a question in the chat, which is, or rather a statement: I think these EU guidelines, guardrails are resistive on such tentative new innovation ideas and tools. I actually disagree, and there's a good reason for that, is that there's a lot of misrepresentation of what the guidelines are in the press around these EU guidelines, stating that everyone is, evil EU kind of press particularly, that they're really onerous in terms of what you have to do and declare. Actually, if you look at the 4 levels that they set, so can't do it, can do it with some guardrails, can do it if you tell people, don't need to do anything, I think they're very sensible. And actually the way they're written, I think, works quite well to allow for innovation with some safety around it. So for example, if you created a new tool that allowed people to generate images of any kind, the guardrail level you would be at would say you need to put some checks in place and it's not creating child pornography, deep fake nudes, or any of those other things, which arguably I would say is a good and sensible thing. But if you're using it to create a chatbot and someone would have the reasonable expectation that they were speaking to a human, you're misleading them. I don't think it's bad to say that that should be declared that it is an AI. So I'd love to know if there's a use case you don't feel fits into their mold. The other thing they've done that I think is really good, if you go to the EU AI Act website, God, that's really hard to say, I'm sorry. There's a little configurator on the right hand side, and you just say, I'm a business, I trade with people in the EU, this is what I do, and it will give you what your obligations are under the guidance. I think that's a very sensible approach that does a good balance between the two things. Now, if you are someone creating an AI fundamental foundation model, you do have to get it verified, and that's why sometimes you see new tools come out in the US first rather than the EU. But again, it's because they're checking that it meets the guardrails of things like it can't be maliciously used, it can't be used to generate illegal content, etc. I personally, having read it in quite a lot of detail, I think it does strike a good balance, but I'm happy to talk about that. If anyone's got any questions, please do chuck them in the chat. And if not, make sure you have filled in that feedback for us. Thank you very much for your time today. It's always difficult to get through a lot in a 1-hour webinar. I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible next week at Crossfield Hall. Always a big fan of coming up to Romsey. Some of my family live that way. See a couple of questions coming in. So thank you very much, and goodbye if anyone wants to drop off, but I'm happy to take a couple of questions for another couple of minutes. So when you start a new chat, does ChatGPT remember your tone of voice from previous chats, or does it need to relearn it? So there is a switch to turn on or off for memory. Whether that's enabled or not will answer that question. So if you go into settings in the bottom left when you're on the web, or I think it's top left on mobile, you can turn memory on or off. Well, it will remember things from your chats. So that will affect the answer to that. Also, there's a section in there called custom instructions where you can put in how you want it to act. And very recently, they added a thing for behavior. So you can set it to act more critically, more friendly, more sympathetic. And so you can tweak the behavior you get from it. So if you go into the settings, I forget the exact name of it, but it's quite easy to find when you're in there. You can see custom instructions is the name of the label. I hope that answers that one. Oh, you've just thumbs it up, so thank you. Hi, Susie. I'm dyslexic. Me too. I'm very badly dyslexic. I use ChatGPT to ensure my letters, etc., are grammatically correct. Same here. Would you declare that for a job application? Personally, yes. And the reason I would do so is I think it is now a bonus to say, to show if you've used AI well, rather than not showing it, and if someone potentially picks it up, depending on how good their use of AI is. Coming back to that transparency piece, I think it is good to say I've used it, but these are the parameters with which I used it, and I had a human editing, because I think it shows that you think about how you use AI. You can use AI and you use it responsibly. So I hope that answers that one. But again, that's a personal opinion. I think some people would potentially say, oh, they used AI, I'm not interested in you working for me. I would say that would maybe filter whether I want to work for them, but that's a whole conversation. Louise, thank you. Mark, thanks, you're very welcome. Yes, Susie, look forward to seeing you next week. If anyone's got any other questions, I hope to take one more quick question and then we'll call it a day. I can see a couple of people have dropped off. Absolutely no problems at all. I know it's just a kind of coming to the end of our 1 hour now. Just to point out as well, I've put links to HeyGen, our AO statement, and if you want to connect to me on LinkedIn, very happy for you to do so. As we said, we will send over the slides and a recording once we've got that sorted after the session. I can't see any other questions, but if anyone wants to slide one in quickly, please do, and I'll answer it. Otherwise, have a great day, and I look forward to meeting you all next week or so.
Can I say thank you very much to Luke? I am sorry for those on the call that have been inconvenienced by the glitches.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, we are sorry about that. Hope to see many of you next week, and yeah, I hope you found it useful.
Thanks very much, everyone. Have a good day. I think we can close it there with no more questions. So see you next week.